Now, in summary, what are some of the things I'm saying? When your children are very young, one of the things I would want you to consider is memory verse. Remember the memory verse we do? We tend to do memory verse about other topics, but never about money. So there's some memory verse I've given to Bella. I think we have time, you can read them for us. Just on each of those categories, how the children can memorize those verses, and as they keep on thinking about them and you discuss with them, you are instilling these principles in them that with time they'll actually be able to apply them. So you can read for us.
Okay, so I'll start with Colossians 3:23 to 24, which is on earning, and it says, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. And 24 says, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward, you are serving the Lord Christ. Should probably change that translation. Does it make sense though? So that's Colossians 3:23 to 24. And then the second one was Proverbs 21:5. It says, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance and advantage, but everyone who acts in haste comes surely to poverty. And then Proverbs 11:24 says, one man gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. That's Proverbs 11:24. And then Proverbs 21:20 says, in the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, but a foolish man devours all he has. And then Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. And then Luke 16:10 says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. And then the last one was 1 Corinthians 7:23, and it says, you are bought with a price. Do not become slaves of men. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I just picked one scripture on earning, planning, and all that. And if you just spend some time in Proverbs, it's a very short book. If you just read one proverb with the kids every day, and then you pick the scriptures that have to do with a financial lesson, you'll be amazed at how much is in Proverbs. And then they're very short scriptures, so it is easy to memorize. That is one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is that when kids are young and we are helping them learn how to read, what do? We buy them storybooks. Have you ever considered buying storybooks with a finance theme? I know we might not have a lot here. Those who write kids' books, please consider doing one. Me, I write for adults. But there are some I have projected. Actually, a friend of mine was coming from outside the country and they brought me very short stories, but with a story on how to manage money. So these are some of them. They are written by the same author. He's called Alt Reiner. So it's a series, 1, 2, 3. I've read them. They're short books. Yeah, so some kids might not get the whole story, but basically they teach the actual lesson. So you might, depending on the exposure your children have, then you might need to explain them, but they are there and you can look for them. So that just as we encourage to help our kids learn how to read using scripture because we'll be putting the word of God in them, then you can also do the same with financial stories. And as they grow older, of course, there's a lot of materials available. Even you don't even have to buy some of them. Look for the balanced authors because there are those people who just will push the narrative, make as much money as you want and all that. But look for balanced authors, Christian authors who have written books on personal finance. They are there. So you need some level of understanding so that when they talk about products that are probably, we call them different here, you can actually give them the equivalent. So start these habits early. These habits also work like compounding. You may not see what is going on, but after some time, you'll actually start to see the rewards of what you have taught them. Start small, and then keep on increasing the responsibilities that they can have or the things they can handle with money. Even if it's their own expenses, you've been buying everything, then from the grocery list, you can start reducing and give them the money to buy for themselves. And ultimately, you can give them all the money that they'll use for their needs, entertainment, maybe with the exception of food and housing. If they lose something, let them pay for it. Yeah? Let them pay for it. Or if they're not careful about something, if it's too expensive, you can cost share so that they start feeling that impact. And then teach them to cool off. When they really want something, let them take a day or two. Let them window shop and look for other alternatives. They might think differently after that. For debt, do not lend money to your children. You'll be instilling a certain culture. Do you want them to be planners or savers? Show them how it takes to pay these debts. Show them what Credit Reference Bureau is all about. And if they don't pay their debts, the impact it will have them. If they are contemplating taking loans, show them how they work and how the compounding effect works against them. So I want to now talk about the last part, which is wealth transfer. So basically, this topic was supposed to be about wealth transfer. But we agreed with Bella that we're all working very hard to pass wealth to our children, but we need to pass wisdom first before the wealth. So that is the wisdom you need to pass. But having passed that wisdom, then what does Scripture say about wealth transfer? So we are working very, very hard, and it's a good thing to leave an inheritance to your grandchildren. What about to children? That scripture talks of grandchildren, right? So should we be leaving an inheritance to our children or to our grandchildren? But what do we do? Okay, I'm not a theologian. I honestly don't know. When you learn, please teach me. But I always wonder. But the scripture says grandchildren. But I think there's a wisdom in that if you provide everything for the next generation, you could be killing the motivation to actually work hard, right? So we need to think of grandchildren. So when it comes to wealth transfer, then we need to realize that is also a stewardship decision. If we need to know what God is asking us to do with the money in our daily lives, then also when it comes to passing to someone else, it's still a God decision, isn't it? He's the one who decides where it should go, right? Are we struggling with that statement? Okay. We said we are stewards. We don't own anything. Everything we own is God's, yeah? So we need his direction on how to spend, or on how to use it. Let me not use the word spend it, isn't it? So while we are here and we are using it, we consult him on what to do with it. But we know that we will leave and we will not go with it. So the decision about who we leave it with, we also need to consult him as well. Right? Now, what usually happens? Do you think when you look at what happens in the world, we have plenty of examples. Do you think that's what happens? We tend to have our own ideas, isn't it? Let me just give one particular example. If you are to say, I will use my resources in death as I was using them when I was alive, when you have your income, we've seen where it goes, yeah? You give, you save, you invest, and you live on it, yeah? Let's talk about the giving part. Where do we give? To church, family, friends, people we don't know, people in need, right? But when we die, where does that component go? There's a component that was going to church, right? So if I have a net worth of 10 million, which used to come from an income of a certain amount, I used to give 10,000 shillings every month to church, isn't it? Don't you think you should give something to church as well? Because you should see your faces. You should see your faces. I think I'm introducing a hard concept too soon, yeah? Basically, what we tend to do is that we tend to make our own decisions regarding what we want to do with the wealth, isn't it? And we look at some of the biblical principles on how to do that. But I just want to challenge you, as you're planning where the wealth will go, as you're working hard, very hard for this wealth, you need to start asking, where will it go? And ask God to direct where he wants his wealth to go, because it is actually his money. So if it's too hard, I guess that's what the gospel does. It's usually not an easy thing. So once you've made your wealth, it's important to know that wealth transfer is not an event, but it is a process. It is something that you need to start as you gain this wealth. So for example, a young person has bought a car. They need to ask themselves, if I die today, who is taking this car, right? If you have investments, you have to nominate beneficiaries, yeah? In event of my death, they should go to these specific people. So it's not something you think about when you think you're about to die, but it's something you need to start thinking about, because even where probably you are supposed to leave a certain amount of money to your children or your grandchildren, you have to look at, these are my children, what am I going to leave them? A good parent will realize that a gift to one child might bless one and harm another one. So even as you're looking for this wealth, you need to know, if I want to leave something, what am I going to leave this child and what am I going to leave the other one? So it's a process, something you need to actively think about. So if you've not started, I recommend that you start now. And as you make these decisions, you need to know this is a stewardship decision. And basically what we are saying is that you're passing this wealth to somebody else who will now start stewarding that wealth. So as you do this, your primary goal should be to honor God, the owner of these things. That should be your highest priority. And we also need to know that when we pass this wealth, it will have an impact on those people who receive it. So it can be a positive impact or it will be a negative impact. So today, most of us just do estate planning, where you go to a lawyer, you draft a will, and then you keep updating it. That is just one aspect of it. And I encourage people to do it, because when you don't leave clear instructions and you leave wealth, money does not make people bad. It just reveals what is in them. But what we have seen is that it breaks families. People who are living in harmony, some of them will break those relationships at that point, and they will never be able to be in harmony again. So it's the most loving thing to leave instructions so that people don't have to guess about what you wanted done with that wealth. So by doing that, then you'll be answering the question, who is the next steward? But like we have said, you need to prepare the steward before you pass the wealth. And the principles of how to prepare them, we've talked about some of them. Now, we pass wealth not just to our children. One of the things as adults we need to recognize is that, especially those who are married, most people don't die on the same day. So one will die before the other. And the unfortunate thing is that most men die before, statistically, die before their wives. Now, sometimes, what I was talking about preparing children, we also need to think about our spouses. Sometimes we think it's the most loving thing to do for a man to work very hard, provide for their families, so that they don't have to worry about those things. But they don't get their wives involved in the things that they are doing, such that when the husband dies, the wife is left in very difficult situations. We've had stories. Yes, the money is all there, but this wife doesn't know what to do with it, or doesn't even know where it is. Yeah? So some of it is lost. Sometimes they're not able to manage it well. So even the intention you had eventually is not fulfilled because you did not prepare your spouses. The other thing is, sometimes we assume life will turn out in a certain way. What do I mean? I'll give an example of somebody I know very well. So they are hardworking men. They provide for their family. The wife never had a problem that my husband will never provide for me. But I think they assumed that the husband will always be able to provide. So he didn't want her to worry. So she never worked. She didn't develop any skills. She took care of the kids, which is a good thing. And then the husband lost the ability to work and became disabled. They have children. Of course, you'll use your resources for some time. The point is, they don't have enough resources for the rest of their lives. So you have to take care of your husband, but now you have to start thinking of, what am I going to do to generate an income? So it's important that we put all those things in mind and ensure that even as we accumulate wealth, and where we are putting this wealth is also taking care of such eventualities. If I lost my ability to work, how would I be able to get that passive income we talked about? Some of it will be insurance, some of it will be other assets. But it's important to take care of that. The other thing I noticed, especially for me who works a lot with retirement benefits, when people are naming beneficiaries, men will name their wives as beneficiaries. Women don't name their husbands as beneficiaries. And for those, most women don't name their husbands as beneficiaries. Most men will say wife 100%. Women, they might feel like, yeah, let me just include him. So they'll put the children and the husband. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But while men do that, the other thing I have noticed about them is that when they're taking retirement income benefits, yeah, so there's an option of taking what we call a joint life, so that in event of my death, my wife can still be provided for the rest of their lives. They don't include their spouses. And not the men here, the ones who don't know God. And I've had the opportunity to work with an 80-year-old man, and I've never seen it from that perspective. So they've lived together, so they're still together. The wife is much younger. Now he's sickly, he's battling cancer. He never named his wife as a beneficiary. Now he's stressed at his own decision because he's like, okay, now how will she survive? So there are certain decisions we make. And remember, beneficiaries you can always change. In events, you don't think you want to leave it to your... And there are some people who do that. HR professionals will tell you, they can tell when the marriage is working and when it's not working, because you come and name your husband, then after some time, 2 months down the line, remove my husband, then all those things. But you need to really think about these people you're leaving behind. Right now, it might not appear like a big deal, but can you imagine if you are the only one who has a pension, and now your wife is 70 and older, and in event of your death, the pension will cease. So you're going to leave her without provision. So let's think about all those things. It's a reality that some people will die before the others. Let's take care of the others. So that was for the adult part. Now let's look for passing wealth to the next generation. There are various decisions that we need to make when it comes to passing wealth. There are mainly 6 decisions. So the first decision is to ask yourself, who will you transfer that wealth to? Remember, I'll share this screen, this slides, so if you're not able to see well. So who are you going to transfer this wealth to? And I said we need to start praying about that question. God, who do you want me to pass this wealth to? You could pass it to your heirs, that's your children, your family, and all that. You could choose to give this money to people who need it, such as churches, charitable organizations, and all that. And sometimes you can choose to give that money to the lawyers. You can have them enjoy the money and the trustees and all those other things. Because if you don't leave clear instructions and your family goes to court, they can spend all of it with. Actually, it's a real case. Is it the Karume or the... I think it's who owns Jacaranda? It's Karume, isn't it? Yeah. So the legal bill now is higher than the net worth of the assets. The bill. So all the money has gone to the lawyers. So it's important to think, where will it go? And as I was giving that example, in our lives we use money to give to the kingdom, to support missionaries, to support the church, charitable organizations. Why don't we include that? I know the West people do that a lot, but we probably should consider doing that as well. So it's important to think about several things. There's one we call the unity principle. Spouses need to be in unity when they're making this decision. Remember, God sees you as one. You are one in his sight. So when this spouse wants this and this other spouse wants something else, what are we really saying? Are you really hearing from the same owner of these resources? So it's important to be in unity. The other one is the wisdom principle. Pass the wisdom before the wealth. I won't belabor that. I think we've talked about that. So when you consider who you're going to leave your things to, you need to ask yourself, this wealth is supposed to bless the next person who is going to handle it. What is the best thing that could happen if I left them this amount of money? And also need to ask yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen if I left them this amount of money? So let's take an example in our context. I know our African men, not African men, probably it's globally, many of them take pride in providing for their families, isn't it? So if your daughter is married to a man who takes pride in providing for their family, and then you have this wealth and you decide to leave your daughter with this 100 million, what is the likely impact of that 100 million on that family? It can be either way, isn't it? They might use it, appreciate it, and use it for their good. But we know there are some people, some men who will feel like, I can never provide to this extent. And so you've actually killed that. There is no joy. They can no longer get that joy from providing because they know their effort does not really count. Whether you do it or not, she's already well provided for. So you really need to look at the interest of the people that you are leaving to this wealth. Then you need to ask yourself, how serious is it? And maybe we go back to that same question. You could also leave money to somebody who is struggling with drugs or substance abuse. And you're like, okay, leave them 10 million. What are they likely to do with it? So you ask yourself, how serious is it and how likely is it to occur? And that should help you in guiding your decision. Now, remember, this question is not just about heirs. It could be you've decided to leave money to the church. It could be you've decided money to leave to a charitable organization or whatever it is. It does not just have, you need to ask that question for all. The next one is the treatment principle. So you've decided you're going to leave some money to your children. Are you going to treat them equally? So I have 3 children, I have 30 million, each gets 10 million. What do you think?
I was just thinking that the question also reflects on whether your children are also equal, whether when you look at them, you think that they are the same. So it might sound unfair, but I'll just maybe give an example. Maybe you have an older child, and you are there present for them much longer. You saw them, you are involved in their education and in their mentorship. They are more stable. But then maybe you have a younger one who hasn't yet grown and matured, and you've left them. So I don't know whether they're at the same level. Yeah. And also flip side, maybe the younger one is less responsible. So might you want a trustee to maybe handle that, but still oversee that they get to come up to the place where they need to be? Yeah.
For me, I would think of transferring wisdom differently. Because kids are different. They have different temperaments and abilities and perspectives and weaknesses. But so I would prepare them differently. But I think for finances, money, and property, I'd try to do it equally because there's, regardless of where they are in life, because there's also a possibility that if you shared it, depending on their abilities, I don't know what will happen to the one I think will do better later. And it might also cause rift between them. Like, why was that person preferred more than the other one? I would just do it equally for money.
That's a very difficult question. When kids are young, you actually have no idea who they are. When they are adults, it's a bit easier. You have a rough idea of who your children are turning out to be. My prayer is that I'm able to hand over wealth when I'm still alive. And what I am left to hand over is very little, and it's already known who it's going to. So if by the time I'm 70 or by 80, I should have handed over. And so that I can know whether I've done a good job or not when I'm still alive. But I don't think it's a hard question.
It's supposed to be hard. It's God's money, isn't it? So you have to seek what he wants. Yeah? So the principle here is Love your children equally, but treat your children uniquely. Love your children equally, but treat them uniquely. So it is possible that in some instances, you'll actually give different amounts to different children. And remember, our role, we are not the ones who provide for our children. We are just conduits through which God is providing for these children. So if your goal is to provide for your children for the rest of their lives, you are going to struggle. Because remember, I gave you an example. 10 years ago, my sister was struggling. My brother was in a very good position. Today, things have flipped. So I have no way of knowing in another 10 years what will happen. So, and that's why wealth transfer is a process. What? I have to change my will today. Next month or next year, circumstances change. I need to adjust based on the information that I have. But my goal is not to ensure that my children or my grandchildren never need God. That's not my goal. They need God. God is their provider. They need to know that their provision comes from God, but He's asked me to pass this to them. So it's also possible that I might not pass anything to them. If God says, take your money somewhere else, isn't it? So love them equally, but treat them uniquely, based on the information that you have. And yes, it's a difficult question. We need to pray about it. So when do you give these things? Timing. When are they going to get it? Is it now or later? And I like what Grace has said. If you're going to teach children to manage money by managing money, we might need to give them some of this inheritance now, isn't it? I'm not saying you give them everything that you plan to ever give them, but you can actually give something so that you see what they're doing with it. You have an opportunity to help them make right decisions, correct if they're going wrong, encourage them if they're doing the right thing. Otherwise, what you're afraid of, most of the people who are not willing to pass this wealth, it's because they know their children are not ready. And what they fear actually happens immediately after they die. So it's either you want to see it happen in front of your eyes or you want to, it will still happen. So transfer the asset to maximize their use for yourself, because again, you won't give everything and then you start depending on them. So maximize your wealth, their use by you, your heirs, but also for the kingdom purposes, right? So you might need to give some assets now, some later, some at the point of death. But some people have too much. They know they will never need it, no matter what. You can actually start doing that. And again, of course, remember, you need to know what will be the impact on the children. So if your children are 20 years old, it's not the time to give them 100 million, right? You might just need to give them one investment, this apartment. They collect the rent, maybe or maybe one house, and then you see what they do with it. Then as they grow older, and remember we said our principle is he who is entrusted with little, who is faithful with little, will be entrusted with much. So as they're able to handle more money, then you can keep giving them. So it depends. The other one is the title. So when do you transfer ownership? Title and ownership. So you can actually, for example, give a child an opportunity to manage a house that you've rented out. They don't own it. They don't have the title to the house. But when the rent comes, they're actually using that money. That is when you transfer, you give them the access to the asset, but you've not given them the ownership or the title. So sometimes you might want to hold on to the title and the ownership, but it is encouraged. You need to also plan when you're going to give it. It needs to be clear. So for example, I've told you this is your house, but I've not given you the title deed. Then it needs to be clear when that will happen. I actually have a very sad case of a friend's auntie who was killed by his own son because the husband to that lady died a long time ago. But before he died, he thought the most transparent thing to do is to call his children who are young and tell them, I have left you this, I've left you this, I've left you this, but it is your mom who will decide when these things pass to you. Then the children didn't turn out to be very responsible, so the lady didn't pass the ownership. So you're growing old, your mom is not giving you what you need, and then I think she made a few wrong decisions where now she decided she'll even take like the rent proceeds and manage them herself. So like pay school fees for their children. So they really felt like this is now getting too far. And it could be that the children were not going to manage the money well because they were planning on selling and all that. So probably she felt like she needs to stick to them. Then they realized this lady is not going anywhere. So they organized and the lady was killed. They did it so well. By the time we were discussing that, they had not caught the killer, but from the past, because she was living in fear, even the way her house, the background proofs she had pushed, she was living in fear. She wouldn't let the son into her house. They can talk outside, but not in her house. She was living in fear. And that's what happened. So you don't need to cling on to these things. So what if the wealth is lost? If that's what God wants you to do. We have many examples. Prodigal son, he gave him the wealth, isn't it? And he went and spent it. But he learned and came back to his senses. Now, is that wealth more important than the soul of this person? And so what, even if they lose all the money? Okay? So once you pass the wealth and ownership, then their responsibility is no longer to you. Their stewardship relationship is with their father. You will have done you'll have tried to pass the wisdom, help them manage, but we know even when we do everything correct, not every child will turn out according to how you did it.
I'm a bit disturbed by the issue of just what you've explained, telling your children, this is what I'm leaving you before you die, because I think it already creates an expectation and entitlement. And from my understanding, the will can spell it out, but then it's, because you don't know when you will die, really, because I think that expectation creates, it's like the children they're entitled, actually that's the word I was trying to say. And they live their lives with some entitlement, knowing that that is theirs or it's coming to them. I'm just a bit disturbed about that because I'm not seeing what it will bring. Like what is the good in it, in a sense? So I see the importance of involving them, especially in the wealth creation, because I see it with a lot of, I'm not a business person, but I've seen it in our family, where there's a close uncle who has a very good business. He's invited the children to be directors of that business. They run the business together. He's paid for their education. They've seen the value of growing the family business. But I don't think there's that entitlement of saying, and they are shareholders, so they know what their stake in the business. But in terms of property, I don't see what the creating that entitlement. I'm not seeing the value of it. And the second part is, you've said that the Bible actually says we are leaving an inheritance for our children's children. How does that look practically? Because the lady you've explained or described, in a sense, she saw the next generation beyond her children. So how does that look like if we were to leave an inheritance for our children's children? How does that look practically? Yeah.
Okay. Let's hear. There's a lady at the back.
All right, so I think it's very timely because the question that you asked first, yesterday, we spent time with family friends. It's Reverend and the wife, and they have 6 children. And right now, when he's alive, he's distributed all his wealth already. All the children have title deeds of the inheritance into their names as at now when he's still alive, and he's around 60. So they have it, even the houses, wherever he has houses. I think he has houses in Karen, other houses in Gong, other houses in Eldoret and so forth. And those houses and lands are in the children's title deeds even now, even as he is still alive. So it can happen, and I think a lot of people now are doing it. A lot of parents are doing it, and they're transferring it as they are alive, those title deeds to the children's name, in the sense of let them have it now, instead of when we are gone, then they are left fighting for it, and they're left scattered, because as Rose said, it's sort of the money reveals the real sense of who you are. You could be a close-knit family, but when money comes in, then divides everybody else. So it's something that is spanning across right now. Yeah.
Thank you. So I think there are some instances, some families that will be comfortable doing it, and there are some that will not be comfortable. So it depends with who your children are. Yeah, and at what age are you doing? So in that particular case, I'm sure that lady had her own reasons. But probably, I believe, by the time somebody is in their 40s and the father already gave them something, I think she should probably have let them have it. It cost her life, from what we hear. It cost her life. So it depends. Remember, we also said you need to know your children very well. So I could look and see, my children, these are not the ones you leave. You give early. I need to maximize use of them. I will pass them later. But there are some who you can actually do it earlier. And there are some who you might need to do a combination of those. Some you will give, others you will not give. There's so I need you to check in my, there's a movie called, I don't know if it's called in something Gift. There's a screenshot I had. The Ultimate Gift. It's something I would encourage everyone to watch. Yeah, The Ultimate Gift. So that was a grandchild. This is a billionaire dying, and he wants to leave the money to the grandchild, but he had to learn a few lessons. And also something about that movie, there were many people who are getting an inheritance, but it was interesting. They were all in the meeting room, and they were in a certain order. You get your inheritance, then you leave the room. The next one is told, so there's some people who knew what everybody else got, but there's some people who only knew what they got. So that is somebody who knew whoever it is that he was leaving the inheritance. So you might need to do a combination of all this. Again, remember, you lack wisdom. What does God say? Ask. So it will not be an easy decision, but God will provide you with the wisdom. So even as you pass this wealth, there are certain things, we're talking about the title now. Some people give children use of certain assets, like you can live in my house, but I've not given you titles. But sometimes we use money to manipulate our children, yeah? I know of somebody who was saying, I'll give you this, then he gets a lot of things from this child, but when the other child comes, he says he'll give that child the same thing he has promised to another child. That is a parent trying to manipulate. Or giving certain assets to the children who are doing better financially or who are more generous towards you. We should not do that. That is not what we're supposed to. And then when you give it, you need to let it go. Remember, you're just a steward. If God has asked you to pass it on to the next steward, let them be accountable to God. So the other thing we tend to do is when we are passing this wealth, we affect our children's lifestyle. So you can afford a certain lifestyle. Yeah? Maybe I can afford to live in the lower Ks, as they were called. But then you are like, I don't want my child to live in the lower K. So I tell them, I'll give you a deposit for your mortgage, or I'll buy you land in a certain neighborhood, and then they can live there. But what you've actually done, each neighborhood has certain costs associated to it, right? So if you move them to Karen, their kids' friends will be going to certain schools, yeah? So the expectation is the kids will go to those kind of schools. Maybe they can't afford those schools. Then even utilities in different estates are different, yeah? Modes of transport. In Karen, you need to have your own car. Matatus don't get inside the estate. So you could be drastically changing their lifestyle by giving them a gift. We need to be very, very careful. So one of the things we recommend, for example, if you want to help your child with housing, because it's a common thing we like helping our children with, and they want to take a mortgage, let them take the mortgage they can afford. Then you start making additional contributions towards their repayment. Now, you don't change their lifestyle. Because that contribution is not mandatory, you can add it and withdraw it at will without changing their ability to afford that home. So don't give them money so that now they can move to a better estate. Help them repay that mortgage as fast as they can. Then, never come between parents and their children. Sometimes we want to give gifts to our nieces and our nephews, our grandchildren, but by doing so, we've not considered the relationship with their children. Well, maybe a variation of what Bella said, when the children say, are we poor? So imagine a case. I can actually give an example that I did myself. So I was trying to motivate my niece to work hard. So I told her, if you get this grade in high school, I'm flying you to Mombasa. We are going to Mombasa. My niece is very academically gifted. her brother is not academically gifted. And my niece got the grades I asked, and I flew her to Mombasa. But I didn't even ask my sister. I thought about it later. So I was like, okay, what kind of holidays does my sister take her children? Maybe they go to Mombasa, but they take the bus. But now me, I've introduced something else. What does that do? So for me, I learned after the fact. But also I learned that I didn't give a similar gift to my nephew. I didn't ask him to set a target that he could achieve. He's not gifted, he's gifted with his hands. Then I should also have given him a target, and then I give an appropriate reward. But now it looks like I favored the sister, and he could interpret, I like the sister, I don't like him. So be careful as you're giving these gifts. Do not come in between the parents. So you might need to ask the parents, this is what I'm considering to do. Can I do it? And they can tell you no, they can tell you yes. So ask for permission. And the other thing, never get in the way of God's way. Sometimes God will allow us to go through difficult situations so that we can learn to depend on him and whatever other lesson he wants to teach us. But if you're always rescuing people, because I have money, I can give somebody money, then you need to ask God, should I get involved in this? So sometimes, and you'll keep that person in that cycle, because until they learn their lesson, God is very gracious. He wants them to learn the lesson, so he might keep them there. And also don't be manipulated by your children, because they can also manipulate you. Mom, if you don't give me this, I won't do this. And you need that health care, or you need something. So train your children. But ultimately, that decision is yours. Also, don't neglect it, because the other thing is people feel like, this is too difficult, I will die. Then they'll sort it out when I'm gone. Then you're neglecting your responsibility. So let's discuss a little bit about businesses. You brought the whole issue of business. How do you pass businesses to the other people, to the next generation?
Two things for me. I'll first go back to what she said about expectations and passing on wealth. I feel, I've been observing a lot also on wealth, the recent things that have been going on. Now I feel like as Kenyans, we are more inclined to fear of losing the wealth in our children, and we expect that expectation that, if you give my child, they will lose it, or they'll have that, what did you call it? Entitlement. I've learned something that, just what you said, that it is not an event, it is a process. So if your child has been going through that event since they were young, like you can have the car, these are responsibilities. By the time you're transferring the wealth, which you should not be transferring the wealth in the first place, it will be such a natural process. But if you've been hoarding in fear, and you're the only God towards that item and that wealth, definitely your fear of entitlement and the expectation will come. And that is the thing that has been holding us back. You find our parents aren't able to trust their children with this property. Okay, let them lose it. The prodigal son lost everything, and still more wealth was enough for that person too. Comes again to business. If your children want to be part of your business, well and good. If they mess up the business, part of learning.
Perfect. I don't need to say anything.
I think just to try and blend in what they've all said, looking at the Tuskys case, as a case study, as an example, not as a case study, it is important, in my view, to involve your children in what you're doing, even if their interest, I repeat, it's my view, even if their interest is not in that. I am saying this because you don't have to be in Tuskys to run Tuskys. Why do I want to involve them in advance? So that I can tell, this one ain't interested, this one is interested. And if, in my view, they all are not interested, then we sit down and say, how are these institutions managed? We get a HR department which is going to select for us, the issues concerning CEOs and how it's going to run, so that they can be like a board of directors or something, just to make sure this business increases or their income. Or we get advisors who will kind of like, translate this business, if it's selling it or what, to something they would, invest in. But I think my priority would be involve them first, let them get a feel of it, and you will also be satisfied, no, this is not working for my children. Can we get people to help us run it? We try that as well. So both ways it goes, just involve them right from the word go, then go through the transition with them. If God gives you more time, it is easier not to just decide, oh, this one is an artist, this one is an engineer, and you're in something else, and you decide, okay, well, let them have it. If they fail, they fail. Now, you'll all have, kind of like failed. Let them know that, we can have alternatives with this process in as much as, you're interested not here. And very few times do you find parents and children being in the same line, because you live a life of seeing the disadvantages in some cases of the direction your parent has taken, and you're like, no, I think I have a better way to this. So in most cases, you'll find they may not be very interested, but let them get to benefit from your investment. That would be my thought.
Perfect. I agree. So involving them in your business gives you an opportunity to teach them. Whether they end up in that business or not, it's something else. But it's important that we know that there's worldly wisdom and there's godly wisdom. So the worldly wisdom tells us you need to be like Asians. The wealth moves from one generation to the next generation to the next generation. Yeah, that could be for some people, but it does not necessarily mean it is for your case. And that's why we keep on saying, this is God's money, you need to ask him. So for some families, that will be the direction, others will not be the direction. Yeah, so everything you said is correct. One of the things is to separate ownership and leadership. The fact that somebody is a child of this family does not mean they're the best leader for that business. So separate those two, and then be clear on compensation. If somebody is earning from this business, what are they being paid for? It must be a specific service they are providing. You're not just earning because you're a member of this family. And then think long term. What if this business grows to become a mega business? What will be the impact? But what if this business also fails? What is the impact? So you have to really think about that. So knowing your children very well is very, very important. And for many people who really want to do these things, many have started considering selling off the business and sharing the money. Likely to have the least impact, especially it might not affect the family unity. So that should also be there. But the problem with some of us is that we want to control the wealth beyond the grave. We are already out of this world, but we still want, some even leave specific instructions, what will happen from this generation to the other generation. Then when will they be able to answer to God? To answer to their mandate, what God wants them to do. So yes, you can leave an inheritance to your grandchildren, and there are tools to do that, but you also need to be very careful that you're not affecting how God will give them instructions, because will they listen to you or they will listen to God? This is money from grandfather. If I don't do what he said, it is cursed. I don't know what will happen to me. That's the story. So we need to be very, very careful. 2 more points. Tools and techniques. How do you transfer this wealth? There are various tools to use. Wills are important. Some people use what we call family companies to a certain level of success, but you really need to be very, very careful with them. And of course, some use trust funds. So especially where you're young, you have young children, you need to think, if something happened to us, what would happen? Yeah, your children might live with somebody else, but do you trust them to handle the money? You can actually set up trust funds. You can set up a trust fund while you're still alive, and it can start operation or it can become operational on death. So those are things you can actually do. We encourage people use a lawyer. These costs are not expensive. You can actually get a lawyer, depending on how much you want to pay, they are there, but use a lawyer so that your interests are well taken care of. So the story of family companies had become quite popular, but my caution on that is to make sure that you're not affecting the stewardship. You're not dictating what these people will do with the money, because once you pass it to them, you need to let go. And then the last part, which I believe we have talked about, is about talking. Have you talked to the people who will be impacted? So most people tend to have expectations, right? Either cultural expectation, the firstborn gets a double share, or the firstborn gets what? But probably God has asked you to do something different. Or you've decided, I'm not going to do it the way they expect. So you don't want people to have a coping gap. You're already dead. You left a will and everybody is surprised. So in addition to grieving, now you've left them in more confusion. So again, we said age appropriate, you need to share that information. Let people not be surprised by what you left, the instructions that you left. Let their expectations match with the reality. And if somebody has other expectations, try and discuss them if you can. So train the next generation on values, goals, priorities, the things we talked about, how to invest, how to grow the wealth, what to do with the wealth. Educate them on laws, taxes, and everything that you know. Basically transfer the wisdom that you have. And those assets that need to be formally transferred, if you haven't transferred, give clear instructions on how they should be transferred and when they should be transferred. And for those who can, you can actually start having what we call family conferences, where you can be discussing these things, and you can introduce children at appropriate ages. Teenagers will probably start understanding what it is. You can discuss what you want them to know, what part of the meeting they will attend and what they will not attend. Sometimes you can even engage lawyers to come and just explain all those things, especially for those with complicated families. So, wealth transfer is a very critical decision. And when we are working very hard to leave an inheritance to our children, we need to ask ourselves exactly what inheritance do we want. We defined what we would want to be at age 85. And most of us said we want to be healthy, we want to have responsible children, we want to have good relationships with them. Then we have to invest that now. Money will be the least of many people's worries. Now, how many of us received an inheritance? Like, you know, the one that makes a big difference. Very few of us have received any inheritance, yes? And we are doing okay, isn't it? So what our children need is not money from us. That should not be the primary goal of our life, to leave them a material inheritance. We need to give them an inheritance that will last. Things of eternal value, their relationship with God, their relationship with other people. And that only takes time, the time that we are going to spend with them. So that's what, as financial advisors, we do. We help people manage their money, and we also help them to make decisions on how they need to transfer that money to the other generation. And we open their minds to other areas where you can give. And one of the things I like emphasizing is the whole issue of giving towards advancement of the kingdom. If we are to care about the things that God cares about, then one of the things that he cares about is that people will come to know him, and we need resources to actually do that. So that even as you are making money, we can actually invest for those particular purposes. You can take a bond, and it will be giving you an income, and you can say, using this income from the bond, it will be sponsoring a certain missionary in a place where the gospel has not reached. You can invest to give to whatever causes that you're giving. And you can actually have some of your assets dedicated towards God's ministry when you pass on, or even when you're still alive. So that's what I had for today. Some of the things I've talked about are documented in the book that I have written, the one that is at the back. It normally goes for $950, but today I'm giving an offer for $800. But the other thing, I'm revealing this book cover for the first one. The first one seemed to be for the older people. The younger people were not interested. They were thinking retirement is very fast. So the next one I've written, the basics of money management you need to know before you earn your first income. Now, if you are going to teach your young person, I believe you need to know what to teach them. So this book is both for adults and also for young adults. The content, I believe it will be useful for somebody who is in high school. They should be able to understand the concepts. I've tried to use the least complicated language that I can. And learning these things together and doing them together will be helpful. So the book is yet to come out. It will be out probably in the month of June. But some of the things I've also talked about, I've borrowed a lot from the book Trusted from Matt Bell. And on wealth transfer, I've borrowed a lot from Splitting Heirs from Ron Blue. And so, yeah, that's what I have for today. Any questions?
I have a question. For us who have very young kids, at what age would you advise us to start things like piggy bank saving and giving them an allowance?
Piggy bank, as I think, is as soon as you can communicate and explain what it means. Because they see you buying things, they see other people, some people even give them money. I believe it's as early as possible. I don't know, 2 years? I don't know, maybe earlier. When they know these are my clothes, these are your clothes, these are my things, I believe around that age it's appropriate. So it actually depends. When it comes to an allowance, it depends. Actually, you can start even as early as around 5 years, 6 years, because you're not giving them an allowance just to keep the money. You want them to learn something. So you give them 100 bob, and you tell them 10 bob is for giving. We are giving to Jesus in church. So they go to Sunday school and they actually give it. The other giving, we are giving to somebody who needs something. We are giving to Jesus. I mean, they will be able to comprehend at that point. So the amount might vary, but I believe as early as your child can comprehend what you're doing. Because remember, we are trying to build habits, healthy habits. So as soon as you can, then the best thing would be to start. The more they are able to handle responsibilities, then you keep on adding responsibilities. So some people have, unfortunately in our country, we don't have a lot of jobs like the West where they're allowed to start working when they're around 13 and all that. But you can introduce it depending on your child. And some child you might start early and it's working, and others you might have to wait a little bit. Some child will rush you because they are grasping these things very, very fast. So I would rather you try, it doesn't work, then you know you need to wait a little bit, other than wait too long and lose on opportunities.
Thank you so much. I've really learned a lot. And I would just want to hear your view on this, if it's okay. So picture 40s, 50s, and now trying to invest to get that passive income in retirement, so as not to, be a burden on others, God willing. Is it okay? You did talk about business loans, if approved by a bank, could be okay, yeah? But I was wondering if it's a loan where now you have charged some pieces of land somewhere, it's still okay, yeah? Like, what I'm trying to ask is, so you're now late 40s, 50s, you don't want to be a burden in your retirement, but you're not going to be earning the way, chances are you may not be earning the way you're earning now. So is it okay to borrow but charge it against something for a business that would now give you that passive income?
We've all learned and we all do these things. 2 opinions, then I give my opinion.
From what, there's someone who said that if you have never done a business, if you're taking a loan for an existing business, you already know the good things about it, and so you're just continuing and growing your business. But if it's for a business you've never done, the statistics of failed startups is very high. That is number one. Number two, someone once said that you also look at what do you have. If you're in your 40s and 50s, there's a skill you have learned. And if you have learned a skill, are you able to start utilizing it without necessarily first taking a loan on that? You only should think about a loan if you're growing, but don't go to business if you've never done business. Failure is very high.
That is what I do with my clients. When they come to me, they come with those kind of questions. And if you are struggling with it, and these are your finances, can I answer that in a minute? These are your finances. You've handled them. I can't answer that in a minute. I'd actually be telling you what I would do if I was in that situation. So for me to be able to advise you, I normally go through a process with you where I first get to know you. Who are you? What is your temperament? How have you been spending money? What did your parents tell you? So that I know the background from which you're coming from. Then I also get to know your values about other things, spending, debt, and all those things. Then the next thing is we look at your finances. Where are you? Okay, you're talking of this particular asset, but what else do you have? Because one of the things that I've noticed with people, many people have assets, they just don't optimize them. So you have an asset, why not sell that asset? Why go into debt while you can sell? So we look at what you have and what that is telling us. What is your retirement preparation? What is your liquidity? What is your ability to go into debt? Then we look at what do you want to achieve? What are those things you want to do? Do you still have college fees to pay for kids? You want a retirement. What kind of a retirement? Where do you want? Where do you want to live? Do you have a retirement home? Or are you thinking of putting up one? What income are you looking at in retirement? And then now, using that information, then I'm able to give you recommendations. And then I'll be able to tell you, maybe you have this asset which you just need to convert into another asset you need to sell. But going into debt is one of the principles: avoid use of debt. We rarely use debt unless it's a reasonable mortgage. Then one of the other things I do in my fifth session is to help you learn how to make financial decisions. I try to demonstrate here. So when we are thinking of the kind of life we want, we say, I want to buy land, I want to buy property. That's not what you want. And that's how we normally approach finances. We normally I want an income. I want this amount of money to pay for my medical bills at this time. So learning how to make those decisions so that you know what you want and you know the objective of what you want, because I want to be financially independent. That means I need to have a regular source of income. And should I get into a medical bill, I would be able to sell an asset to pay my medical bills. That's what you want. We define that. So I take you through a decision-making process, and then the last session, normally there's one area that requires more work. So some people we discuss the wealth transfer, now we go into details. Some people we talk about what will they do in retirement. Some people it's an issue with children, so whatever else that needs to be done. So that process, by the time we are done with the first 3 sessions, I'll have spent 6 hours with you, then I will have a better picture to advise you. So we are all on different lanes, and sometimes we ask for advice from other people, but because we don't have the confidence to give them all the facts, we give them piecemeal information, even when they advise you in their best interest, you end up doing the wrong thing because you also didn't disclose everything. So I encourage people, those who are ready, willing, I normally charge 65,000 for that service. And I encourage people to come as couples. So if you come as one, you'll pay 65. If you come as a couple, you'll still pay 65. Yes. No, I don't do group because, as you can see, those are very personalized. We are doing your financial personality. We are doing your temperament. We are doing your financials, your goals. So I've not been able to do groups.
Do you have any courses, like I have a niece who is going to be going and living abroad alone? Do you have like courses that can prepare for them to branch out?
First, pre-order that book.
Yes.
Before you earn your first income. We are taking pre-orders.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I'll be able to convert that into something I can put online.
Okay.
But at the moment, no.
All right.
I don't have one.
Okay.
Yeah.
But can you meet with?
Sorry?
Are you able to consult with her?
Yes, my youngest client so far was 23 years. So I believe as long as they can understand the concept, I'll be. And I have a special price for them. Yeah, I charge 30,000.
Oh, okay. All right.
Below 30.
Okay, we'll pick your card.
Okay.
I wanted to ask a question about the books that you suggested. There's one for children, Alt
Rainer.
Yeah. How do you spell that? So
ART RAINER.
Okay, and there was another one you said before that, Bright.
Okay, I had asked you. I'll also give the links to those videos.
Yeah.
There was Bill and Vonette Bright, who started Campus Crusade for Christ. Is it that one?
No, there was a book.
Trusted by Matt Bell.
Not that. Just before you gave the books for kids, that recommendation, yeah, the story books, there was one you gave before, but...
I think it's Trusted, yeah. Yeah, God's Plan for Your Finances is the one I read. It's by an author called Dwight Knowles. Yes.
Thank you very much. That was very informative. I have a question just building on to what she had asked. I also have small kids. So the first question is, is it okay for us to start training them that they need to earn their money when they are young? And what would be age-appropriate duties which we can give them so they can learn about earning money?
Okay. How old are those kids?
There's 7 and there's 4.
Okay.
And 1.
So for those ones, I think I would probably choose to teach them about work. Look for scriptures that talk about work ethic and all that. And hopefully, as that conversation is going, if one expresses an interest, Mom, is there something you can do? And then you pay. And then you can actually explore and ask, okay, what would that be? Some might actually ask you, can I do this for pay? So I wouldn't want it to be, I think 4-year-old might be a little bit young for pay, but I would want them first to understand the concept of work. And as you teach them that there's work with pay, work comes with reward, they might be interested. And then you might be able to find age-appropriate things, which might actually come out of your conversations, and then you can see whether that's the right thing to do. By the time they are 10 years, they fully understand the concept of money. And the enterprising ones have already, remember we're also talking about temperaments, yeah? The cholerics, probably they're already thinking about making money. So those who are ready, I would say proceed, but you need to make them understand that the value of work, reward is additional, yeah? Because whether there's money or not, we are going to work. Adam was working before the fall. We are created to do specific things. So let them appreciate that and then introduce reward and then later work. I wouldn't want them to know that they're here on earth to work, like for money. That's not the main thing. So I would think, of course, we have limitations in terms of law, what kids can do and what they cannot do, but within your home, you can decide to introduce them. You might not be paying them cash. It could be a treat, then later introduce money. But these kids know a lot about money. Even at that age of 4, they know money is a medium of exchange and money is good. It's a good thing. There's power in money. They know that. Money moves things around. So you just pick on where they are.
I have a question about debt. So let me understand this. I think what you're saying is that if you want to buy something, no matter how good a deal it is, we should save to buy that thing and not take a loan to buy. Is that the principle you're saying that?
The biblical principle is avoid debt. The motivation behind taking debt is the issue. Why are you borrowing instead of saving, investing to buy it? That's the question. So when you interrogate that, it will tell you whether you should go into debt or not. For example, today maybe you don't have savings that's how you are. Family member is very sick. They need to go to ICU. They are saying, and you can tell this will save their lives. They are saying we need 200,000 shillings. Will you say avoid debt? You'll go swipe that credit card, isn't it? But with time now, you'll start planning because you know such a thing can. Our parents are aging. The least we need to know is that we need to have some money that can rush them to a hospital. That is not an emergency anymore when your parents are aging, isn't it? But when I want to buy a piece of land, because I hear this is a good investment, why do I want it now if I can't afford it now? Because it's a good deal, I would want to live there. Okay, why can't I save? Even if by then it will be double that price, why can't I save for it? And again, sometimes we limit ourselves. We think that's the best there is. But there'll always be something good. We say the beautiful are not yet born. I can say the good things are yet to be discovered. Yeah? So the motivation behind debt is usually the issue. Ask yourself, why am I taking debt? Sometimes you'll realize it's either you don't want to wait or you don't want to miss out. Everybody has it, so I look like I'm doing nothing. I need to have an asset. It might not be a good reason. Then if that's the case, don't.
Okay. Then when it comes to businesses, would you advise, for example, if someone feels like I need to expand this business, I feel like, if I'd take a loan, this business I'd be able to expand more. Would you advise that, or you'd say that the business saves to expand?
Many businesses, I believe they should grow organically. Okay. Many businesses, because if you're serving 10 people, you want to grow from 10 to? 20. Why not grow to 15, to 20? Avoid use of debt. Debt, the effect of debt is not just the cost. but even the mental burden. And even like we said, if you have debt, you'll not easily listen to what God is telling you. You will not be generous in giving because part of your income is going. You might not be able to save. So while that business growth might appear like it will sort out a lot of problems, what we know is that sometimes it creates an insatiable greed. It grows, then from there you want to grow a bit bigger, then you're like, money is never enough. No, money can be enough. So I'm not saying that it will depend with the particular decision that you're doing. So I can't say you can do it, you cannot do it, but ask yourself, why are you doing it? What if it just grew organically, which gives you freedom? You can even leave what you are doing and now come and do this. But as long as you have debt with a bank, you'll not be able to do that. So we need to be free. We've been bought with a high price. It's not good to entangle ourselves and enslave ourselves with things. So I know it's countercultural, but if we really want to manage our money God's way, that is what he says about debt.
Thank you.
I wanted to share on her question regarding rewarding children. So I wanted to share what we do. So we normally have a reward chart. Okay, my children are 7 years, 4 years, and 1 year. So we usually have a reward chart where there are certain tasks. For example, make your bed, eat vegetables because they don't like vegetables, things like clean up after yourself, and all that. So we have about 8 things, and every day when they do something, we give them a star. Like if she made her bed today, we give her a star. So we count the number of stars at the end of the week, and each star is maybe 10 shillings. So by the end of the week, if you've done like 5 things that are worthy of stars, you get 50 bob, and now you have the 3 piggy banks. So 10% is giving, and then 20% is spending, and then now the 74. Yeah, so from that reward, you're able to now give them money regarding that. Yeah.
Okay. Of course, the category of what you give with, mandatory with pay, mandatory without pay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, let's clap for her. I didn't want you to go. Don't go just yet. There's a few things I wanted to mention as you've brought them up. But, I love that. I love what you're doing. It's fantastic, particularly for the younger children. I hope we've taken that away, and the mandatory with pay and so on and so forth. My rule of thumb, and what I normally advise to parents with those with younger kids, don't pay your children for things they should do anyway. Nobody will pay them in life for making their bed in the morning. Nobody will pay them for finishing their vegetables. So whilst at a young age, it's fantastic, and I love how you're translating it to you get pay and then you put it in for saving and whatnot. It's good for training, and then you win that off and get new goals, isn't it? And I'm sure that's what you're doing. So it's good to, reinforce positive behavior, but once it's there, stop. Move on to the next ones if it's potty training or whatever. But then you shouldn't keep paying, because nobody's going to pay them to use a toilet. Pay them for the things that they should not be doing as children, the child labor things, quote unquote. They shouldn't be washing your car. So if they wash your car and they're sparing you that 200 shillings at the car wash, pay them 50 bob. It's a deal, because your car is not going to be that shiny anyway. But yeah, so pay them for the things that they don't need to be doing is my rule of thumb. We took something from her when we met, and she says, when you teach them the value of money, when you go to the supermarket, give them 100 shillings, tell them, this is what's on our shopping list, but this is yours. You can spend it however you want to. We still do that till today, in different ways. We're getting to the point where we're introducing allowances. And how many of your kids love Kinder Joys? They moved from Kinder Joys, but if your child is a Kinder Joy person, they've moved from, when did it get this expensive? Did you know that they're up to like 129, 130 bob, basically, when they used to be what? Yeah. So they've understood now that when did things get so expensive, I was so proud, so proud. And we keep going nowadays, and they don't want to spend their 100 shillings, and they'll just take it back and save it because they're like, "Aye, these sweets, and then they'll be finished, you know." So they've actually understood the value of money because of that one little tip that you gave us. And then another one that I introduced is, you know how we're all being, there was the Matter Hat Run, there was the Run for the Bible Less, there was, what other ones are coming up? And these people are smart, and if you work for these organizations, good on you. They know that cuteness will get you free money. Our kids can get money from uncles and aunties and grandparents and, for free for these Matter Hat Runs and Run for the Bible Less, and we'll just give them. And I always tell them, we're not going to give you free money. I think you should find something to do and earn the money that you want to go and give towards this Run for the Bible Less. How much do you want to raise? 5,000 shillings. Let's strategize. How will you raise 5,000 shillings other than just using your cuteness alone? I'm not trying to raise a socialite who will be sponsored out of my girl, that she'll just get paid for being cute all her life, and vice versa for my son. So that's the one thing that, I took on, because this year alone, I think they've done Run for the Bible Less, and then they did one for their school, and I'm like, hey, how many more are coming? Cuteness alone is not going to get you by, my friend. But there was a story, and I wanted you to just share it. I don't know if it's the Splitting Heirs author or which one, who God instructed him not to give his children an inheritance. Who's that? Or is he the owner of some organization, and you remember?
Warren Buffett, who's like one of the richest men in America, he said his kids have to work. He's not leaving them all their money, his money.
Yeah.
So Warren Buffett has done that.
Warren Buffett has done that. There was another one who owns this organization and is a believer, and then at some point he cracked and gave it to them, and then later on he realized that that wasn't what God intended. He wasn't following God's instruction. But I remember talking to you, and it's an American, it's not Warren Buffett. He owns some organization in the US, and he's a believer, and that was just the principle, which just goes to show that I think, in wanting you to bring out that story, that it's not one size fits all for all of us. And I know some of the things that you've shared this morning have hit us like a ton of bricks for, what? But I think what we need to do is go home and process a lot of what we've had prayerfully and individually for each of our children. And just see what God would have us do going forward. I did want to also ask you, how young can you be to open a money market account?
Okay, for money market, you must be an adult, but what I recommended is that you open one in your name as the parent, and then you only handle their money. But for the child to have their own account, they must be 18 with an ID and a PIN.
Okay. So that's the thing. I mean, some of us, even at 18, a money market was the last thing on the top of our heads, But hopefully our teenagers, and you will grow up to be those teenagers who have these accounts. When I was challenging you, and I'm so glad to hear that you've written this book, I was like, no, these lessons need to be passed on to our kids younger. We need to start teaching them to our kids younger so that they're not learning them at the ripe old age of millennials and builders and whatnot. Let them learn when they're younger so that they can run faster and be wiser, and so on and so forth. I remember we lived in Australia. If you've been a chapelite for long, we were sent off by the church with my husband some time back, and we always knew Americans start working young, 13, 16. And I always said, we're not going to go and start fighting for the same jobs at Carrefour that a married man with 5 children needs to pay rent and feed his children and educate them. But I've seen this with our bishop, where he'll look for opportunities, your networks, your friends, and they've looked for jobs amongst their friends. If you own a business, I'll ask you, employ this young lady, and at some points even said, I'll pay you to pay her at the end of the month, but I want her to know that, and she need not know that it's me who's paying her salary indirectly. but just so that their kids could learn the value of hard work. You need to get up and get to work on time. You need to dress, for whatever job you're going for, and so on and so forth. So there's ways we can all do it, from as young as they are now and until they're old. And with the wealth transfer, may God just advise us and give us his wisdom for each of our children. And then I'll pray for us in a bit. Father, I thank you so much because you are a good Father, and you've provided for us and our families. And even in probably some difficult moments, we have known you to be Jehovah Jireh. And so, Lord, we come before you this afternoon with everything that you have said to us, repentant in those ways when we have not really adhered to what your word has to say about wealth and the resources that you've given to us. Lord, forgive us. But we also ask that as we march out of this place, equipped with all the knowledge, with all the tools, with all the resources that we need to do better, that we would genuinely be doers of your word, that we would not allow the enemy to steal the deposit of what has been deposited in us, not just for our own sake, but for our children and our children's children. So, Lord, I pray that we would be parents after your own heart, that we would parent our children according to your word, that we would be faithful with the little, and that as you continue to entrust more unto us, as we're faithful, we would model that for our children. We would teach that to our children and our teens, and that, Lord, they would equally be good students and good stewards of the resources that we will pass on to them, and the resources that you, in essence, will pass on to them and allow them to grow into. So, Lord, thank you for the time that we could spend here together, and for the lunch that is before us. Thank you again for your provision. And we just come before you and finish this session with hearts of thanksgiving. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.